there's been a lot of research on culture and having an engaged culture, and organizations that have an engaged culture are quoted at having a 65% greater share price increase, 26% less employee turnover, 20% less absenteeism, 15% greater employee productivity, and 30% greater customer satisfaction levels. It's almost like you can't ignore this anymore, right? Cultures, I always find interesting in organizations because everyone knows it's got a culture. Sometimes you can describe the culture or some of the things that are going on, but no one really knows how to influence it. And yet the reality is that it is quite accessible for leaders to influence, and they do make a massive difference to it. And we talk a little bit about how they can do that. The key thing around culture is, though, we talk about culture like it's something you can see, and it's really difficult to describe. What you tend to have are microcultures and things like that, but also, you can't see a culture, you can't see values, you can't see a mindset in an organization. What you can see is behaviors. And so if behaviors are the currency of culture, then sometimes that's the level we have to play at to get change in organizations working in the right way. And we found definitely some really good techniques for doing that, which we've helped organizations move the dial on. But I don't know, Mark, from your point of view, culture in Formula One, how important is that?
It's extraordinary. I mean, I think every single year that I've worked in Formula One, I've stepped back and reflected on how little people talk about culture, and yet culture absolutely influences outcomes. So if you take one extreme in Formula One, let's take an uncompetitive team such as Williams, which it's a 16 times world championship winning team. They've finished last in 4 out of the last 5 seasons. 2 years ago, they've scored no championship points at all. And when you talk to people there, they'll talk to you about a negative culture. And you say, what do you mean a negative culture? And they'll say, well, people minimize their contribution because there's a little bit of fear, there's a little bit of a blame culture. People are always looking for a fall guy when something goes wrong. There's a sense of, people minimizing their contribution rather than maximizing their contribution. Their former performance director told me that, in his opinion, 60 to 90% of the time, people are just trying to cover themselves rather than deliver, great outcomes. I mean, it's a nightmare scenario, but I think we can all relate to it. And then the other end of the scale, you have a team like Mercedes, and you have, let's say, their chief technical officer, James Allison, who I've written about in the book. James telling me that his job as chief technical officer, weirdly, is not so much technical as kind of cultural, to make sure that, he has a mantra which is making sure we always blame the problem, not the person. So as an organization, we're just going to overcome problems every day. So we're going to work together to overcome those problems, to get the best outcomes, to learn together, to share together, to share knowledge, to co-create, to collaborate, and part of that is that you have to create a psychologically safe environment where every single member of the workforce knows that they can put their hand up and either ask for help or come up with an idea that's going to help the organization. And the organization's all ears, literally wants everyone to contribute. How much better is that, where everyone is looking to maximize their contribution rather than minimize? And there's no doubt that comes from the leaders, the way that culture is led, walking the walk as well as talking the talk. It's how you behave in meetings. It's how you address the workforce. It's how you set out your strategy. It's how you respond to problems when they inevitably arise, and so that's why it's such a fascinating topic, and one which I think is kind of too often brushed under the carpet. We can all talk about operational challenges or whatever within the business. Get the culture right, and it becomes a heck of a lot easier to overcome any challenge.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? In the book, we talk about Ed Shine's model for cultural change, and it's one I've been a great fan of, because it's usually the one I can sit in front of an exec team with and highlight that everything they've tried so far is not in the top 6 layers of Ed's model, the sort of primary embedding mechanisms for new values, culture, and behaviours in an organisation. What they do tend to do is do lots of things in the bottom 6 layers, which are much more about reinforcement and stabilizing things like, you know, the organizational design, the structure, the systems, the procedures, the rites and the rituals, and the space and the stories and the formal statements of creeds and charters. And it's interesting, isn't it, that we try and grab hold of those tangible things much easier, and forget about the influence, actually the top 6, which are all about leadership. And the reason I like his model is because it makes it accessible to leaders. Because literally, if you can get together and concentrate on these 6 things and be intentional about them and aligned as a team, you'll probably get the influence you're needed. I'm always reminded slightly of a certain company called Enron, a company whose leaders were jailed and bankrupted because of fraud. Their lobby proudly displayed the values of integrity, communication, respect, and excellence. So we do need to be really careful about what we put as our culture and values on the wall versus what's really going on in an organization.
So one of the really interesting aspects of successful Formula One organisations is having a culture of celebration, so that not only are you problem solving and dealing with the day-to-day challenges, but you're also taking time out to celebrate the things that you're doing very well. And that's an incredibly powerful thing. And I think, you know, in my experience of talking to companies all over the world, one of the things I would come away with in terms of my takeaways is all too often people are just, you know, frankly buried in the day-to-day challenges. You know, someone said to me, you know, 99% of my job is just misery. And I thought, how awful is that? Take time out to celebrate contracts that are won, contracts that are delivered, customers who give great feedback. You know, those moments where you're patting each other in the back and saying, actually, we're really quite good at what we're doing, even though we know the reality of the challenges that we face day to day. Create a culture of celebration, and people who work for you will want to continue being part of that journey of success.
For more information, please visit sullivanstanley.com/future business formula.